Shabbat Shalom. I'm Cantor David Proser of Kempsville Conservative Synagogue, Kehillat Bet HaMidrash in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And this is our Torah portion commentary for Shabbat of March 20th, 2021, corresponding to the 7th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, 5781. We thank Rabbi Joseph Prauser, Rabbi Joyce Newmark, Rabbi Adam Rosenbaum, and the United Synagogue Torah Spark series for their various teachings and publications about this week's Parsha. Parshat Vayikra, also known as Torah Kohanim, the teaching of the priests, begins the biblical book of the same name this Shabbat. It begins on page 584 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 410 of the Hertz. Vayikra, also known as Leviticus, is the shortest book in the Torah. It's the third of 5 and therefore the middle book of the Torah, thus reflecting the central portion of the priests and ritual law in biblical Israel. It's indispensable reading for us to be able to trace our religious experience to scriptural origins. Yet, it's very tempting to dismiss the book's detailed description of the sacrificial cult as of no importance to us today. Because after the thrilling adventures of creation, the Tower of Babel, the flood, the near sacrifice of one of our forefathers, and the sister-switching marriages in the book of Genesis, the book of Bereshit, and after the desperation of slavery, followed by the exulting freedom brought on by God's rescue via the 10 plagues, the splitting of the sea, the revelation at Sinai, the mutiny of the golden calf, and the construction of the Mishkan in Exodus in the book of Shemot, we then get to this book that can almost be described in the same hushed tones that mariners refer to the Bermuda Triangle, or Hollywood executives refer to Ishtar, or actors refer to the Scottish play. In other words, we now get down to the day-to-day, down and dirty, or should I say, down and bloody work of performing worship to God via a system of sacrifices that will be performed by the priests, Aharon and his family, on behalf of the Israelites. Studying the book of Vayikra opens one of the greatest theological challenges to confront the contemporary Jew. If we do not pray for the restoration of the temple and the sacrificial order, indeed we've already modified our liturgy to remove these references from our Musaf service, then what's the benefit to read such gory detail? Well, we read to remember, we read to be challenged, we read to own our history, even if we cannot fully make peace with it. So with the Mishkan, the tabernacle, now complete, the day-to-day work of using it begins. The Parsha begins, Vayikra el Moshe, Vayidaber Elov me'ohel moed lemor. God called Moshe and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. God explains the sacrificial system to Moshe with instructions to pass on the information to the children of Israel. The Parsha describes the different type of sacrifices that were to be brought by individuals. The Olah, the burnt offering, was a voluntary sacrifice completely consumed on the altar. An Olah could be cattle, sheep, goats, or birds, depending on the donor's means. The mincha, a grain offering, was only partially burnt on the altar. The remainder was given to the priests to eat. There were two types of mincha, the communal grain offering made on Shabbat and festivals, and the individual offering brought by those too poor to afford an animal for an olah. The Zevach Shlamim, the offering of well-being, was only partially burned. After the designated portions were burned and placed on the altar, the rest became a shared sacred meal shared by the donors and the priests. A person who committed a sin accidentally or unknowingly was to bring a chatat, a sin or purification offering. Community elders would also offer a chatat when the entire community had committed a sin inadvertently. Finally, the asham, the guilt offering, was to be brought when a person was unsure if he had sinned or when he wanted to make amends for a sin previously committed against another person. In the latter case, the asham was in addition to making restitution and paying a fine to the person who had been wronged. These voluntary offerings constituted the regular religious expression of everyday Israelites, their leaders, and their collective community. As primitive as this system of worship must seem to us today, we have to remember, according to Dr. J.H. Hertz, the editor of the Chumash that most of us grew up with and continually used until a few years ago, the study of the origins of human worship has shown that animal sacrifice is an immemorial institution among virtually all races of men. It was therefore essential to raise this universal method of worship to a purely spiritual plane. This is done in Leviticus. All magic and incantation are banned from the sacrificial cult, and everything idolatrous or unholy is rigorously prohibited. The Haftorah for this week is from the book of Isaiah, verses 43:21 to 44:23, found on page 607 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 424 of the Hertz. Today's Torah portion presents detailed instructions of service in the tabernacle, the Mishkan, leading to obedience to God. The Haftorah deplores Israel's neglect of all worship. It's addressed to the Jews deported to Babylon after the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem. Israel has been utterly careless of God, but he, for his own sake, forgives Israel's iniquities, redeems Jacob, and will glorify himself in Israel. Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and feel free to leave comments below. Shabbat Shalom.